Hey, what's up everybody? It's Ben with Maker Decor. For today's video, I'm going to show you how we made this arch. The main part of this video is kind of discuss how it's made and why mine are a little different from others. You can actually make these a little different. If you wanted to, what I've seen a lot, especially like on Instagram and stuff like that, you'll see a lot of people, they just get a sheet of plywood and they just cut the arch, usually 1/2 inch or 3/4. Those are a lot of woodworkers. I've done it before, but when I first started building, I built it more with the woodworker mindset. How that was different was I had built a curved arch, I think about 6.5 feet by almost 4 feet wide. I made it out of MDF. It was 1/2 inch or 3/4. When we took it to events, that thing was heavy. So I learned pretty quick. You don't make the same thing with the same mindset as a woodworker to make sure it's strong and stable and sturdy. You still want it strong and stable, but you want it as light as possible. So when I started redesigning a lot of my props, I had to think different and think more of like a decorative mindset. And so decoration or more props, they're meant to look good, but not really meant to hold up stuff. So that's where my designs come out a lot different. Most of my props I actually make out of very thin plywood, usually 1/4 inch, 0.5 mil, which is very thin plywood, like you can snap it. What I do to reinforce it and get that sturdiness that we need is I use the 1x2s, 1x3s, 1x4s, depending on what I'm building, in the back to reinforce it. And I use wood glue all along. What the wood glue really does is kind of connects the whole thing. Screws will hold in place, but once you wood glue through that whole thing, it like gets that thing stuck together. It makes that thing stable and strong, and you're not ripping that apart. Definitely the main key to a lot of my builds is to make them light is wood glue. It maximizes the strength tremendously, a lot over what you would get from a couple of screws or a couple of nails. So if you kind of want to test my theory out, what you can do is and you're not sure which one to build, because it will be a lot simpler just to get a 3/4 piece of plywood, the 8 foot by 4 foot wide, just cut you an arch and then just put a back plate and boom, you're done. Simple, nothing in the back. Mine takes a little bit more steps, but it's a lot easier to do, just to cut out the design and stand it up, what I've seen a lot of people do. The reason I don't do that, if you go to a store, try to get that sheet of plywood by itself, because you're almost using the whole sheet of plywood. So try to get that 8 by 4 foot, 1/2 inch or 3/4, grab it out and try to lift it up, and now start thinking, if I'm going to an event and I'm going by myself, I'm gonna carry this and put this and stand this up, and how much weight are you gonna have to hold in the back to keep it from falling forward? We had to use so much weight just to keep the one I had built from falling forward. Okay, I'm going to an event, this is what I'm carrying, especially if it's just you, or maybe you and another person, you never know what happens, and you start trying to set up, that thing's gonna be very difficult. And man, sometimes you go to an event and you're like, they planned it for here, and they're like, oh, it moved, we gotta move it upstairs, and you're like, it can be frustrating. I know a lot of you know, setting up events, a lot of things change all the time, and what you're communicating online or through messages doesn't exactly show, especially in pictures. I know a lot of you have done that before, where just the communication is not always 100% what the client says. It kind of brought us back to making things as light and portable as possible, and the builds I do are a lot more decorative in mindset. I have a sheet of plywood here. I'm going to show you lifting this one up. I just painted it, so hopefully it's dry. Kind of lifted it up, and I'll come to show you the back and show you what I mean. So here this one is. I should have put something to grab onto it, but this is the one I just finished building. The very thin plywood and the sideboards, and I can lift this up. And there's really nothing to grab on here. If you wanted to, you actually add some little handles, and it'd be a lot easier just to pick up and take with you, but just from grabbing the sides, now I have a full 1/2 inch, and sometimes a lot of people use 3/4, which is way heavier than what this is, but let me show you the difference. So this is this one. So you can imagine taking pretty much just this, taking it to an event and setting it up. So that's one of the reasons my builds take a little bit more work, but they're definitely worth it, and they're more on the decorative side. They're a lot lighter. I can imagine hauling this down to every event, and that's what I did with that first shower backdrop or round top backdrop, 3/4 MDF. Whew, never did that again. MDF too thick, too heavy. The So all the mistakes I made, I remade them, set those plans, and that thing is light, easy setup. You want a decorative build, not a woodworking build. So you want it sturdy, but you don't want that weight. So that's some of the reasons I put a lot of time into my builds and a lot of time into the designs, because I'm thinking from a decorative mindset instead of so much as a woodworking mindset, which I'm not a woodworker or a maker, just make anything. I just like making things. Let me put this back. Definitely love creating content and making the builds. Now let's get started and let me show you how I build this. Alright, so I did want to mention in there are some reasons why I would just use a thicker plywood instead of the thinner plywood with the frame. There's certain reasons with that. So like if I'm building a ripple wall, which I just did here, that's going to be a 1/2 inch because I'm actually going to be cutting kind of small grooves into it. So I'd want that full 1/2 inch plywood on there. So the thickest I would ever go on plywood is 1/2 inch. And definitely like the foldable backdrop that we do, that's going to be full 1/2 inch. I'm not gonna make the borders. I could, but that just seems a lot more work than it would be beneficial. So definitely if I'm just doing that, it simplifies the process. Use 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch, easy to fold. So you have those other backdrops that are definitely a lot lighter, definitely a lot safer to kind of use. So say someone wants like three different backdrops that you're bringing, you for sure you know how you have 2 of those light ones, and then maybe you'll have the foldable one that they want in the center. At least you know you're not carrying so much, and it gets heavy. It just does. So definitely there's good points when you would want to use the 1/2 inch. I'm also going to be building a wall like this, but with shelves so people can snacks and drinks. And so if I'm going to put shelves, I'm going to be screwing to it. I can't really use that the other plans because it's going to be too shallow in the back. So I am going to use the 1/2 inch. Makes life a lot easier. Just kind of screwing those in place where I need them. So there's definitely points to use. When I would use the 1/2 inch is when I know I need that sturdiness all around. When I'm using the very thin plywood, it's just it's a lot lighter, a lot easier to handle. So definitely, even if there's a mixture of backdrops, I know I'm gonna have some light ones a lot easier. And especially if it's just you and maybe someone wants a quick setup, you're like, look, I got this, boom, super light, set this up, boom, boom, easy. The other thing with the foldable backdrops, when I make them full 1/2 inch, it makes them easier, because if I didn't have them, it's like awkward to carry, plus they're heavy. But when we have them the 1/2 inch but they fold, it makes it a lot easier. You kind of grab under, you can even put some straps through the center and kind of lift up and carry it. It's more manageable than when it's kind of cut in half. And if you're cut in half, you're going to be using a 1/2 inch plywood. I just wanted to let you know there's going to be different reasons why you would use the 1/2 inch and why you'd use thinner one. And so some of the reasons, that's why I don't make them all in 1/2 inch, because that adds up, that weight, and by the end of the day your back's gonna be like, why am I hurting? You're like, I'm just making backdrop, I'm just making designs, but you're carrying these big old 2x4s and 4x8s, 3/4 sheets of plywood back and forth, having to get extra people because it's so much. Lighten the load. The ones that you can make light, and the other ones that are not, and then find other ways like the foldable way. So definitely that's a lot of options. Always think about transport and setup, because that is the biggest hurdle for any events.